Hey guys, I'm here to try to help you get through the research for your secondary sources. I know that we've been talking about it in class, but I thought maybe it would be worthwhile to do a short video on each separate website, on each separate database. So in class, we talked about the fact that you can get secondary sources, and when we say secondary sources, we're really talking about the idea of critics. What do the scholars say about your particular author? So the critics are what we call secondary sources. They are commenting on what your poet has written. If you're talking about the poetry itself, for example, if you're doing Robert Frost and you're talking about Mending Wall or Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening, the poems themselves are what we call primary sources. Okay, so right now you're reading your poetry and you're getting some ideas from reading your poetry, but we're not actually working right now with quotes from the poems. What we are working with are quotes from the critics. Okay, so when you go on Kellenberg and you go and click on students and then you click on library, you have a couple of different options. And I said to you, go to the second info base and click on info base using the password and the username that they give you, KMHS Phoenix, and then you'll come to Bloom's Literature. Okay, type in your author, last name first. So I had already typed in Robinson, Edwin Arlington, popped up, and when I clicked on it, this is what I was able to get, this screen right here. If you have options on this side, I think a really great place to start is with overviews and synopses. Okay, because this will give you some feedback as to what the summaries are of the individual poems. So I click on this and then I'm going to get a screen that looks just like this. You'll notice if I were to able to scroll down, these are titles of individual poems and they're not the poem itself. They are what critics are saying about the poem and what critics are saying about this poem. So it's very helpful to be in this overview section. So I'm actually going to click on this very first one, which is entitled Collected Poems, and then that's where my work begins. I actually have to read this article. I have to go through it to try to see what might be an option. And as a matter of fact, as I scroll down and I look through this particular section, I notice, oh, wait a minute. This is something that could be a possible theme. That certain poems, like this one, for example, Richard Cory, explores the deceptiveness of public appearances. Well, maybe I might want to do something with appearance versus reality, or the masks that people wear. So I like this. I'm going to copy this onto a note card. So a note card would be the direct quote. Okay, you can have as many note cards as you want from a particular article. If this is a really good article, I might find another one and another one and another one. But right now, just for argument's sake and for time's sake, I'm just going to say, oh, you know what? I really like this one. I'm going to copy it word for word with cue marks on it, around it, on my note card. So then my note card would look like this. Since I started the quote in the middle of a sentence, and I don't really need what preceded it, I use what's called an ellipsis, a dot, dot, dot. And then I take the comment, the poem explores the deceptiveness of public appearances. Because this is an online source, there's no such thing as pagination, so in order to hold the spot, I'll just put in parentheses the word online. For my own edification, I'm putting in brackets the name of the poem that they were referring to. Because you know what? I haven't read Richard Cory yet, and maybe it's going to be a poem that I like. Since this is the very first source that I've consulted, I will put the number 1 in the corner. And that means that I took this from the very first source. This is an example of what we would say is a note card. Okay? and that's great. But what I need to also do for my note cards is to do a second kind of card. This second kind of card is what you would put on your Works Cited page. It's what we call a source card. In other words, I need to put down information involving the name of the man who wrote this article that had this quote in it, where the article originated from, and all that other kind of bibliographic information. So what's really neat about the websites on the Kellenberg library section is that they'll give you the citation. So it just becomes a matter of copying. For example, I go back to my original article, and if I look at the tabs at the top, you'll notice the tab that says citation. All I need to do is click on that, and voila! I actually get the citation. So I'm going to copy it just as it appears. And anything that is in italics, I will use an underline for, because I can't really write in italics in my penmanship, So all this would have to be underlined. When I get to the .com, I can stop, because I don't really need to have all that funky stuff with the letters and the stuff and all that. But I do need the access date. So my index card then might look something like this. Actually, this was supposed to be underlined too. Sorry about that. I copied it word for word, facts on file. I got to infobase.com and I stopped there without doing all those funky numbers and things like that. And I have my access date. This number 1 corresponds to the same number 1 that I had on my note card where the quote was from before. If I want to take a lot of quotes from this particular article, I just would have a lot of note cards with the number 1 in the corner. That's all. And so hopefully you see an example of both a note card, which is a direct source, a direct quote, and a source card, which would essentially be the information that I put on my Works Cited page. And that's an example from Bloom's.